Digital Foundry is sponsored by the powerful, upgradable MSI MPG Infinite X2 desktop PC, featuring Intel Core processors and NVIDIA RTX 40 series graphics.
Hello and welcome to Digital Foundry's worst PC ports of 2023. Yes, that's right. We're not punching down, we're punching up today at the publishers. Not really, but yes, today we're going to be talking about the worst PC ports of 2023, talking about essentially the things that we didn't like that we saw this year in PC ports, some ports that fixed them over time, and others that really didn't. And to talk about this travesty today, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, John Linneman, who's celebrating Christmas quite early this year.
One could say that, yes. The room is on fire in honor of bad PC ports this year. It burned off my facial hair this time, so, it's that kind of day, And,
yeah, I know. Yeah, what can I say?
This is a video I feel like we had to make this year because we kind of agreed about halfway through the year that this is probably the worst year in a long time for PC ports. And there's one company that we'll be getting to in particular that has, they've had some issues to say the least. So, yeah, Alex, definitely. Why don't you lay down the rules first, though? Because we actually did take certain things into consideration when selecting this list.
Yeah, of course. So the first things that we're going to be talking about is games that we have personally played, and most of them we've reviewed in a full form video. We will not be talking about games that we did not play and we did not review in videos. So if you find a game on this list that you don't agree with or something like that, basically we can only talk about things that we have real experience in. The second thing is that we kind of had a minimum 3-month cutoff before we would start talking about games, because we still think games in their post-launch patch cycle, we should give them the benefit of the doubt to continue patching until then. So there's like a 3-month date to around like September-ish or so that we're not going to be talking about games after that date, because they're still technically in their patching cycle, and we want to give them enough time to make any fixes that are there.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I have my thoughts about that as well.
Yep.
Products should probably be ready for launch, but that's usually a publishing thing, and we're going to be nice about that this time, because some games did actually improve.
Yeah, and another thing to kind of lay a ground rule about is we're not talking about the developers here. Nope. We are talking about the things that were published in this case. And it has nothing to do with the developers themselves. This is all about what has been published and what is not. And that is completely a different realm. It has nothing to do with the developers themselves. So we are not calling out developers here. This is just the product and the people who put it out. Okay, John. Shall we
Where
get
are we
into
starting,
this?
Alex?
Let's start with probably the most infamous one of the year, and I want to say it is The Last of Us Part 1. Now, the first 3 games I'm going to be talking about on this list this year, actually, they have kind of a good story at the end of things. But The Last of Us Part 1's story in the initial part is not good. It launched with so many issues that we at DF didn't feel like we could cover it properly in a traditional video review. We were obviously dealing with something that was just not finished. So we decided to do a 3-way playthrough. And do you remember your impressions from that playthrough, John?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I tried to play it on my PC as well. And I was shocked by the severe amount of stuttering, the long shader compilation time, the horrible CPU performance. I mean, our systems are very powerful, and yet they were absolutely dying on this game. It did not run well. And in fact, it really didn't look better than the PlayStation 5 version, while also running so much worse. Yeah. It was kind of mysterious, I would say. And then we started to see more from I think Rich tested it on a card with less VRAM. We're talking 8 gigabytes of VRAM or so. And yeah, there is an argument to be made that 8 gigabytes is not enough these days. Sure. But as this game will eventually prove, it's more than enough for what this should have been, and how it shipped basically meant that 8 gigabyte users were left with extremely low res textures, shockingly so. So the whole thing was basically kind of unplayable at launch, and it reminded me a little bit, possibly even worse than Batman Arkham Knight at launch.
Yeah. I mean, that's another infamous one that we have to cover on the channel one time, going back.
It's fine now. But
it's fine enough now.
Long time to get there.
But here, like you're saying, the issue with the texture situation was that we shouldn't expect a game to have perfect textures on a limited VRAM pool. But 8 gigabytes is still a lot of VRAM to make good textures with. And the textures that were presented by the game's launch version were just woeful. They were just not good. They were really sub like Xbox One, PS4 level games. They were really poor usually.
I mean, they did in fact look like a bad quality PS3 game in terms of textures.
Yes, it really did at times. It was woeful, like we said. So there were things that I loved about this game, like the alleyway of mediocrity, as I termed it in the video. Like this alleyway that on a Ryzen 5 3600, the game was so CPU limited to a degree that you just really couldn't understand, where like this alleyway where nothing is happening, it's like just sub 60 FPS on that CPU. Didn't make any sense. But like I said, in these first grouping of games here, there's a positive story here where it took a number of patches. Yes, it did. It took till about, I would say, patch version 1.10, I believe it is, to the game to get up into a state where it's like, actually now, this is pretty great. They dramatically increased CPU performance. I measured in that alleyway of mediocrity like a 30% performance increase versus the launch version. Another thing that they improved that was probably the most key thing was that textures on 8 gigabyte GPUs now actually look really, really good. They look the same basically as like you would get in that PlayStation 5 version. I guess
exactly.
Like, one of the caveats is that they can technically load in a little bit slower to fit into that pool RAM, because texture streaming is now an adjustable option in the game, which was an amazing, thing that they added in that they didn't have to, but they did, and they made the game better as a result. Long shader pre-compilation times went down dramatically without causing extra shader compilation stutter by that final patch. And, it's just a better running game with less visual errors in it, because the launch version also had some visual errors in it. Oh, yeah.
That's right. Certain visuals just didn't work properly as well, and we were confused by that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the pre-compilation thing was interesting because we were obviously pushing for pre-compilation step. I think that's key, but there's ways to do it right and ways to do it wrong. And I think making a user sit there on a fast CPU for upwards of 45 minutes before they can play, that's not the right way to do it. And it did not work well in this case.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And so here I would say now, as of this video, we're highlighting this game, but as a positive. It started off as like one of the worst PC ports of the year, but it got so much better over time through some really dedicated patching, and we're proud of the way it is right now. Shouldn't have launched the way it did, but it is now a lot better. I'd still say there's a little bit of wiggle room here for it to be better. Like, I still think the GPU performance isn't perfect exactly, but it's so much better than launch, and it's now actually completely playable. And recommendable, I would say, for most rigs out there. Okay, yes. John, this is a game you covered. The next one on the list is one you covered extensively as well, and you got a different taste of it. I covered it on PC, and that is Forspoken. John?
Yes,
Forspoken, as Rich would call it. This one was baffling on every platform you played it on at launch.
Yeah, it was. I mean, even on PlayStation 5 when it comes out, this one absolutely surprised me, because I would say Final Fantasy 15, I think we can agree, was a very handsome game for its release time frame.
Right.
They did some amazing stuff with their GI system. The whole thing just, it looked really great, especially the towns. It was a beautiful game. You could tell a lot of work was put into the material systems, the lightings, the way everything interacts. It was awesome. So Forspoken uses that same technology base as the base for itself, right? Mm-hmm. And so you kind of expected something similar in quality, or at least, I kind of expected something superior given the amount of time that has passed and the fact that it was now targeting a more powerful console. But it comes along and it's terrible. I think the lighting was unbelievably flat. The ambient occlusion they had, which was based, I think it was the Cacao, which is Caca.
Cacao.
The AMD
CACAO.
The CACAO, whatever. But it looked like it's the worst kind, where it just looked like this outline shader, like somebody took a black marker and traced all the edges of the scene geometry. It's really ugly. And there was really no decent indirect lighting or anything. So you'd walk into these areas, they'd be full bright, have the outline shader thing going on from the Cacao, and then there's zero indirect lighting. And there's just glowy specular everywhere that's coming from nothing. And it was blindingly bright, and it felt so wrong. And then on top of that, it did not run well. Like
No.
the performance was lousy, especially on PS5. Like we were seeing dips into the 20s in there.
Yeah.
It was terrible. And then we checked it out on PC, and my first impression was actually like, oh, this runs a lot better. But it certainly didn't run that well on many other PCs. And then we quickly discovered that a lot of the settings didn't really work at all.
Yeah. It was one where like I was like debating like, how do I talk about it? I was like, how does the dynamic resolution run? Does it even work? It was like
No.
I was just like trying them back and forth. I was like, does the VRS even work? I can't even find evidence of its existence. And it's like all these things that weren't working, on top of the fact that the game, like you would turn on and off like ray trace ambient occlusion, you'd be like, what is this even doing?
What
What is
did
the
it
setting
do?
even doing? And like still
Did
now,
nothing.
it didn't really do anything.
Well, wasn't it the case where it only worked in the cutscenes?
It worked in like some aspects
Some
of the cutscene, but not
cutscenes.
like, yeah, it was totally weird. And the thing is, like, all that baffling performance that John was talking about on the PlayStation 5 was also there on PC. Like, if you loaded this game up on a mid-range Ryzen 5 3600, which I showed off in the video, my initial video, like you would get just like drops below 60 FPS in like that main town square area in that first name of the city. I forget the name of the city. It starts with an A, I believe. But like it was just like really bad for the visual return. The visual return just didn't match at all with what like your performance was at the time.
No, and I mean, some of it was just like they made weird garish decisions with the game's lighting systems and just some of the art itself. It really just, it had a very strange look to it, and it felt like they were trying to go for something sort of eye-catching and unique, but it just didn't coalesce into something that was nice looking, to say the least.
Not at all.
So as a result, when you combine that, it was not good on any platform. But like you say, you know, the PC version at launch felt very sloppy and kind of not complete yet.
Yeah.
But then miraculously, somehow they actually took on all of this feedback that was given to them, and they, I would say, greatly overhauled it in many ways. But some of that just involved stepping back, I would argue. For instance, they brought back the ambient occlusion system that they had developed for Final Fantasy 15, which was a bit coarse, but I would say produced significantly better results within these types of environments. So just by re-enabling in that, it made the game look better.
Yeah, they really did.
But that wasn't it. There was other things as well added on. So the PS5 version runs better. It looks better. And then on the PC side, Alex, you tested it with the later patches.
Yeah, and this is one I covered in my kind of PC port update video in the middle of the year, and it was obvious to see it was running better on the CPU side of things. The textures were looking quite a bit better. That's another thing that the issue was on PC, that like you really didn't have good control of the texture option, and the textures that would load in that initial PC version were just like so low res. It was just inexplicable. Once again, kind of like The Last of Us, it was like, why are these the textures that are fitting in an 8 gigabyte GPU?
Right, yeah.
At the updated version that I covered, they actually loaded in, looked really good. They weren't the highest res textures that the game could possibly display, but they were at least approachable and reasonable, something that was completely missing in the launch version. A lot of the things like about options not working correctly, like the VRS option was completely scrubbed out of the game. Dynamic resolution now had a more consistent way it worked, unlike inexplicably just not working at launch. And it was just a better running and looking game due to the fact that they changed things like the SSAO being better. RTAO is still a little bit of a mystery in the game. It doesn't seem to really affect much of the environment.
Right.
But, you know, it was just running a lot better and looking a lot better. And they improved the game drastically versus how it looked at launch. And it's one that I would say, we're mentioning it on this list because it started off as one of the worst PC ports that I'd played in a long time, and it ended up being really pretty good at the end of things. So bravo to the developers who made that game, and thank you for sticking with it to the end. Wish it launched better, but that's the way these things are.
I agree. That was a good turnaround. But our next one, though, also kind of has, it's one more that has a somewhat happy ending, I would say.
Yeah. John, this is Redfall. A game which you once again covered at launch on the Xbox Series X and I guess S as well. And I covered it on PC. And this was one where it launched right after another game on this list. And I was just like, I can't believe I'm seeing these same issues as a game I just covered last week. I cannot believe I'm seeing the same issues. On PC, at least, Redfall, in addition to all the visual garishness and issues that you saw in that console version that John covered, issues that were kind of manifesting there were also really manifesting on PC, like the poor CPU performance. Like, the reason why the game was locked to 30 FPS on console at launch was most likely due to that CPU performance. Yep. And on PC, if you ran the game on a PC, oh my gosh, like what you would get out of a mid-range, mid-spec PC was just really dreadful. There's no way you were anywhere near 60 FPS in the game. If you turn those settings up in that town area, which a lot of the game actually takes place in, and if you even drop the settings to like the lowest, the game, first of all, looked really poor. And it also didn't run well still in those town areas. Like the frame times were just awful on top of a low frame rate sub 60. It was a game that, I mean, it had other things that were a problem in it, like the menus not being too great.
There was the big, I don't know, did PC have the problem with the decal system not working?
No, it worked more enough fine on PC, but you
remember on Xbox, it was the decals would load in. It would take upwards of 60 seconds sometimes for the detail to load in. And they use it for large graphics across the world. So you just walk up to like, well, just about anything, and it was just super low res. And you'd sit there and wait, and it would have to load up.
Yeah. On PC, it wasn't really that. It was more just like you had like the really bad shadows, just like you had on Xbox, and there was no way to fix them up at all. It was a game that just didn't look any way better than the Xbox version in a meaningful way, which you would usually expect from a PC version, especially in things like shadows. And yeah, it just didn't look good, didn't run well. Fast forward, Oliver covered it recently again on Xbox, and I mentioned some PC stuff in it. And it's now a much, much better game. The visual issues with the shadows were cleaned up. The CPU performance is dramatically better. I showed it on a Core i9-12900K, running a lot better on the CPU. And these translate over to the Ryzen 5 3600, which can now actually get a decent 60 FPS in the game, which it really couldn't at all at launch. And there are some more options in there too. One thing, though, that it did not totally fix up is the traversal stutter that the game has. But in comparison to things that we'll be talking about very brief, soon enough here in this video, John, the traversal stutters are not completely like every 5 seconds or something like that in this game. It's not like every minute or so. It's, splits up the world in a way where it's not always so intrusive. It's just, it's with something that I wish they really could fix up, but in the end, it's a lot better than it was at launch. That's for sure.
Yeah, and they also, as you kind of noted, the game itself has improved. This is definitely a case where the game clearly launched before it was ready, despite the delays, and it was kind of a black eye for them, which is a shame because Arcane, both the Texas and Lyon studio, they've produced some of my favorite games over the last decade or so. Like, I really love what they've done, and this one was definitely the worst thing they'd ever made.
Yeah,
but you could still see, I mean, we've kind of since learned, that it's a little bit of a victim of what ZeniMax was trying to do at the time with making these multiplayer online connected co-op things and trying to force the team into making that. Probably wasn't the best idea, and hopefully they get back to full single player stuff. But I can at least say that now there's a decent enough game in here, and it can be fun, especially in co-op, and it actually does run okay now. Including the Xbox version, by the way, which is much better
with that 60 FPS mode. So
exactly. But yeah, it's nice that at least the PC version is competent and very decent now, which it definitely was not at launch, as you suggested.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the third positive outcome story, I'd say, this year, where it launched in a bad state and they have indeed turned it around.
Yeah. Could be a little bit better in some areas, like I said, with a traversal stutter, but it is dramatically better than it was at launch.
I also want to highlight, this one kind of falls a little bit into that little 3-month window thing, but I did want to say that Bethesda already came and sort of fixed Starfield. if you recall. Starfield's PC port at launch I don't think was bad, and it wouldn't necessarily go on this list, but it is a case of them actually listening to feedback and addressing pretty much all the issues that we raised on the game.
Yeah,
and
they did.
It's in a very good state right now. So
agreed.
To me, that shows that Bethesda, and by that extension, I suppose Microsoft and Xbox, they are actually trying to ensure that their games are taken care of and are given the attention they need to shine, even if they did launch in a bad state. And this is really important, because the next part of this list, these next games, oh boy, this is bad stuff. And Alex, I think we should do this in order from least bad to worst.
Oh, okay.
They're all bad, but this is some crazy
hard
stuff. You ready? Let's get into this.
Okay, so this was a little bit hard to order, but I decided that the third worst PC port that I played this year is Dead Space. And the reason for this is because so there's a lot of stuff going well for Dead Space. Amazing visual audio remake of the original game. Good menu system that allows you to tinker with things in real time. Something that other games on the list do not have at all. Looks great, sounds great. General GPU performance, really, really good. But as soon as you start playing the game on PC, you will know it. It is like one of the highest rated comments about it in the Steam forums, like constant discussion about it. It's in the title of our video. This game has incredible stutter struggle.
Oh God.
And it's weird because you'd think on the surface it seems like it should be fine. It's Frostbite. There's a shader pre-compilation step as the game starts up, which is usually always good news. But you get into the game and you realize a lot of it isn't necessarily shader compilation stutter. Mm-hmm. Like there's a handful of them, and I point them out in the video that I made on it and on the update video I made on it as well. They happen like, when you start like a cutscene sometimes, or when you do something for the first time, it can happen still. But most of them are from like the just walking across the game world, and it's hard to know without full profiling tools, and that's not our job at DF, but it most likely is related to the loading and deloading of the game world around you.
Yeah, because when the game was released, I actually spoke with them, and that was one of the big features that they introduced to Frostbite that did not previously exist in the engine, right? Mm-hmm. Was this streaming of a consistent world, loading in new structures, unloading other structures as you move through it. This like streaming system. I mean, there's obviously data streaming in Frostbite anyway, but the way they were doing it and the way they were able to do this seamless world, that was new to the engine. And I suspect that this being the first attempt at that, it's probably somehow tied to it. And it's just a side effect of the implementation. And it is a bummer that they weren't able to solve this, because Frostbite games in general, I say, usually do exhibit excellent performance.
Right.
I had just played through Need for Speed Unbound, and I've only tested on my rig, to be fair, but that game runs like greased lightning. Super high frame rates, no stutter, like in the open world. It feels awesome. This is so much worse. And you're right. I would say like at points you think this doesn't seem that bad, but it's the problem with the fact that it's just they kind of keep popping up as you move through the game. So it feels like you never really shake the stutters. Anytime you do anything major, you get to a new scene, some kind of big new thing happens in the game, all the stuff that should be drawing you into the world of Dead Space, you get hit with these stutters, and it's constantly pulling you out of the experience.
And that is just like you're saying that even though you're talking from the perspective of a larger rig, like if you're on a mid-range rig, the size of these stutters is also larger. Yeah. It's proportionally larger. That's something that I showed off in my video back then. And if you're like, the Ryzen 5 3600 is usually pretty great for getting that console level performance. And in this game, you're just nowhere near it in terms of fluidity. The consoles also have a little bit of like traversal stutter in the game, and it usually manifests as like double animation frames and stuff like that. But here on a Ryzen 5 3600, the game is it's just not at all fun to play, and it loses all of the ambience and atmosphere because every single time you go near a door, and the game has tons of doors. That was the original Xbox 360, PS3, PC 2008 design of the game. And every single time you go near one, the game will stutter. And you can just go back and forth in areas and just constantly having it stutter. Oh, it's such a shame. And the reason why I want to call this one out very specifically, along with some of the other ones on this list that we'll be getting to momentarily, is that the game got some updates post-launch, but that was it. The game was dropped like a hot potato. Like,
yeah, that really bums me out too, because I like this remake a lot.
Yeah.
And
it's such a bummer.
To their credit, they did actually fix the console version. If you recall, it launched on console with VRS, I guess the non-hardware VRS variant on PlayStation 5 specifically, but it didn't look great on any of them, and it was forced. And it had such a detrimental impact on the image quality that it just kind of destroyed the game. Like, especially in dark areas, it was just nonsense. Noisy pixels everywhere, and it looked terrible. And they did actually go back and fix that at no real performance cost, interestingly. So they were able to achieve the same performance as before on the consoles at 60 frames per second without destroying the image. And I believe VRS remains an option on PC, and it is a little bit better because it is the higher resolution, or it's hardware VRS.
Right.
But I did think on PC it still had the same problem because it seemed to apply to the pre-upscaled version. So if you're like using, say, DLSS, rendering at a lower internal resolution, it's applied to that lower internal resolution and then upscaled from there, and you end up with an exceptionally nasty looking image. So
yeah, it was just like, for the amount of degradation it added to the image, the performance uplift that I could measure on PC was really small. It was really weird. It almost feels like it was labbed in some sort of way, where it looked good on paper, but in practice, it just wasn't actually something that was great. Thankfully, they allowed you to toggle that on and off on PC eventually. So that's all good. It would have not necessarily been that way at launch. This is just one where it really bumps me out because I love the game. I love the original Dead Space. I love everything that they did with the remake, visually, auditorily, etc. Really great, but it's just so, and the thing is, it won't necessarily ever be fixed at this point in time because they've dropped it.
Nope.
And so in like 5 years from now, you could still be loading the game up on a big PC. And because, IPC increases and memory subsystems are not increasing the same way they did in like the 90s, you'll still be coming up against these walls where the game will still stutter most likely. And that's really bad. That's not what you want to see for the legacy of a game. So really big shame here that it is the way it is.
This is also one of those games that has so many of those like homemade fixes. You go onto all the forums like, if you go into this folder and rename this to this and then put this file here and then delete this file, it fixes all the stutters. And then you see it didn't fix mine all below it. So there's all these anecdotal points about it fixing stutters, and it's hard to know what's going on with any of this stuff, and it's all just very frustrating. But when you look at conversation of this game on PC forums, it is everybody's talking. How do I get rid of this stutter? About it.
Yeah,
and you kind of seemingly can't do it completely.
No. And that's another thing that's gonna apply to the second worst port that I'm going to be talking about on this list. So I famously declared in the title of the video the worst AAA port of 2023 for this game, and it's Jedi Survivor. And I gotta say, covering this one at launch, it was, after The Last of Us Part 1, and I just couldn't believe it. It was also Unreal Engine game, and I just went in with like the worst expectations because they showed off like preview video of this game, and the preview footage was like super stuttery and just messed up looking. Did not look right. They did not demo the game off well, however they were demoing it. And then I loaded up, and like the first thing I saw when that like ship in the initial, I'm talking about the initial launch version here, the ship just crosses in front of the screen. There's a massive shader compilation stutter. It's the first thing you see in the game, and it causes one. And then I get further into the game and I realize it's not just shader compilation stutter. That's almost actually like a smaller subset of the issues here, like it was in Dead Space. The biggest issue is just like everywhere you go in the game world, especially the more dense areas of the game world later on, Kobo, you get like just incessant stuttering on no matter your rig, no matter your settings. It's just like, it's always present in the game. And
It does not feel smooth ever. This game doesn't feel smooth on any PC, I will maintain.
Yeah.
And I feel like anyone that thinks it does feel smooth is simply not seeing the issues, because it's not just stutters. There's also issues with camera translation and the way it actually moves through the world, and just so many other little issues like that add up to something that feels terrible on the PC. And
it's so bad. Yeah.
It's really upsetting too, because the game itself is very well made, but
it seems that way.
It's terrible on PC. And frankly, the original game also had major issues on PC. And guess what? Never fixed.
Never fixed. I loaded up Jedi Order, or was it Jedi Fallen Order? Fallen Order right before I started Jedi Survivor, because I wanted to talk about the fact that the first game was never fixed. And I was playing that game on like a 12900K, and I was still finding big frame time spikes all over that game, especially like when you get to any of like the more open Dark Soulsy areas of the game. And the same issue, even more, just more so in Jedi Survivor. It's arguably worse than its
I would say
prequel.
It is.
Yeah. And for me, the one thing that really disappoints me is they did start patching the game. They did bring up the performance patch on patch in certain areas of the game, like in that Kobo stage that I would always bench over, and I talked about multiple times. I don't even need to talk about it anymore. It did get better over time, but the core issues were still there. The stutteriness and like the CPU load just not making any sense. Like you can still load up the game now after all the patches. You could turn on frame gen, whatever, and the game will still stutter in the exact same areas as it did at launch when you start getting into the game. The CPU performance in the opening credits like stage of the game, that like Coruscant stage, it's still just as poor as it was at launch. Like it's just a game where they patched it, and like the patches, they nominally increased like the frame rate, the average FPS, but it doesn't really matter so much so if the frame time spikes are as bad as they are. So yeah. That's the way it is, and it's really sad to see, because I think there's probably a quality game in here. I only hear really positive things about people who are playing through it and ignoring the issues, or just like taking them in stride. But for me, as someone who enjoys visual fluidity in their games nowadays, it's like one of those games that I just really can't play. It just annoys the heck out of me.
It's I'm bummed out too, because I like what I've played, but I had to put the game down because it was just the performance issues were bothering me. And then on console, the image quality was so lousy. They fixed it somewhat in terms of performance there, but the game just it doesn't run well on anything. Like the whole thing feels like it's been spoiled by some of these technical issues. Right. And that's really, really unfortunate, because I loved the original game, and yeah, I wanted to love this game as well, but I just can't right now. And it's one of those cases where once you see these issues, it's just really hard not to be bothered by them, right? Like, and I couldn't do it. And as a result, this is definitely one of the most disappointing games of the year as a result of the technical issues. And it's become kind of our intercompany whipping boy for this, just because it just, man... Yeah, they missed the targets so much with this release. They
really did. And it's one of those ones that, like I say in the video, I almost think like it makes a mockery of like you trying to upgrade out of its issues.
Yep.
Rich made a video about Arkham Knight a while back about how you can, over like a decade later, you can somewhat iron out the issues. It's still technically there underneath it all. Yeah.
It's not fully fixed, but
yeah. But like, here, where like I even show in the video that I made on it, the update, that even if you like lock the frame time, and the frame time graph is producing real new frames like each time, and it's like a perfect 16.6 milliseconds per frame, the animation in the game stutters at the same point it would when there's a normal frame time spike. And it's just like, you can never get the game looking smooth. And I actually honestly have no idea when the game will ever look smooth, like if it really will.
It may not be possible. They never fixed the original, and it seems like they've stopped supporting the PC version of this one as well. I feel like the only hope is like running this on a more powerful console years later will at least maximize. I think it uses dynamic resolution scaling. It should
do that.
It should allow it to hit the ceiling and also run consistently.
Hopefully,
we'll but it's not good.
That's not good. And it's, like I said, just a shame. And it's one thing that I didn't like making it my whipping boy for the year because I don't like being negative. If there's one thing that I need to say about this video, this is a negative video with positive aspects, but I actually prefer the good story. I always want to talk about it. I always love playing a game and enjoying the technical aspects of it.
I don't like these types of things either, really, but I felt we're doing this because of the fact that we don't want to see these types of releases anymore. And I don't think it's going to necessarily change anything at large, but I think it's important to get this out there so people understand that a lot of gamers are affected by this, especially in the PC space. And we need some hope that it's going to get better, I think. So
yeah, but
that brings us to our last one. And this one is fabulous in the sense that, you made a video of when you first played this. You actually were recording the game and something got messed up. So it was actually capturing your microphone audio. And so the whole video has you making like idle chit chat to yourself in the background, but it's actually live reactions to the technical problems in the port. And it is fantastic.
Yeah, that'll maybe
what
pop
game
up
am I
on the
talking
channel
about,
somewhere.
Alex?
What
game am I talking about?
This is Wild Hearts.
Oh my God.
This one's so bad. This is okay. So there's a reason why I wanted Rich originally. When Rich and I were going to be publishing the Jedi Survivor video when that came out. And Rich had a different title. He said it the worst PC port of 2023. And I said, that's not technically true, Rich. I didn't cover it, but Wild Hearts is worse. But I said to Rich, I think it's AA, not AAA. So we made a technical consideration there. Worst AAA port, worst AA port, whatever. But this is actually just the flat out worst port of 2023. So the reason for this is simple. Jedi Survivor, whatever. Poor menus, incessant stuttering that you really can't get rid of.
It's bad, but
bad. It's obviously not good. Dead Space, incessant stuttering you really can't get rid of, also not good. But this one, the amount of stuttering and the reason and the way it's happening is just almost like laughable.
And
like
the length of the stutters.
Oh my God, they're huge. You just like start the game up and there's footage running on screen right now. You just start the game up. You just start like moving forward, stutter, but nothing changed in the environment. Why am I stuttering? And you move forward a bit more to other areas. You start like realizing that it is just happening at just like certain lengths of time sometimes, or it's connected to certain areas of the world you go through. The game just never, ever stopped stuttering. Ever. The entire time I play. Like, I didn't even count the amount of stutters I did in the first 30 minutes gameplay, but it's probably in the hundreds. Like, and this is on a Ryzen 7 7800X3D, like the top of the line processor. It has nothing to do with your CPU. It has nothing to do with anything.
We've not found a way to power through this, have we? Like, it's
not possible.
This is just how the game is. And it's just going to slap you in the face constantly throughout with these awful, super lengthy stutters. And it really isn't just like, oh, here's a 16 millisecond stutter. I mean, these are like gigantic, like 100 milliseconds at points, stuff like that.
It's constant too. Just like you go across one little room that's probably like 20 by 20 meters across, and you just constantly see traversing that room just back and forth. You just see stutter. It's so bad.
Exactly. It's not like a traversal thing where it's like it happens, you're in the room, it's fine. It just keeps happening.
It just keeps happening in the same room. I have no idea what the game is doing. I really have no idea what the game is doing.
Yeah, like
some of the stutters
back there.
Some of the stutters though, I did chalk up to shader compilation, because there's a couple times where you hit an enemy creature for the first time and it's really obviously that, or like the boss character slams the ground and it brings up some effect for the first time and you do see a large stutter. The game doesn't seem to have a visible shader pre-compilation step, but it's just so stuttery the entire time, where I honestly couldn't believe that this game was being sold. And I honestly couldn't believe that I was examining a post-patched version of the game. This game came out really early in 2023, if I'm not mistaken.
Was it February, maybe?
Yeah, Tom covered it at the time on consoles.
Yeah, it was late February, and I think Rich did the PC section.
Yeah, Rich did a little PC section in a DF Direct for us.
Yes.
And the fact that I loaded up the game and I had the exact same experience as he had, this laughable, stuttery, for no reason stuttering, experience the first time I played the game, almost like 10 months
I'm actually
later.
looking at footage now, and it's like it's the case where the stutters are so long. Like he extended the frame time graph to 120 milliseconds, and some of the stutters are so long that
Same
they
in my
go
footage.
below 120 milliseconds.
Yeah, like these are these are visible to anyone. I can understand sometimes some people are like, I don't see little drops at 33 milliseconds. That's totally fine, whatever. But like these ones are so obvious that they had to have shown up in all the testing for this game before it was published and released.
It just feels like the whole game is freezing constantly as you play. It does not do this on console, by the way. Not that the console versions are especially great, but it doesn't have this problem at all. So it is strictly a bad PC port situation.
Yeah, 100% bad PC port situation. And, I was like curious, like, is this the game engine? Because we've seen this game engine used by Team Ninja before, and it's used in games like Neo 2, and it's been upgraded over time. It's got a lot of great visual features. I've always kind of liked this engine.
So this is made by Omega Force, right?
Right.
And which is different from Team Ninja, of course, but I think they are using that same engine.
It's the same technology. You can see it in the menus. Okay. You can see it in all the options too. And so Team Ninja released Wolong this year, running on apparently the same technology, and it has a lot of the same menu options, and it's also DX12. Well, guess what? That game, it has a great shader pre-compilation step before it starts up, and it's lengthy enough, and it catches every single thing I saw in the first 1 hour of gameplay. Zero issues there. That game, even though it's DX12, does not have this stuttering issue when you move across the game world or do anything in the game.
Indeed, it does seem to be using the Katana engine as they
That's
call
what it's called, so, Katana engine. Yes, I
but
didn't
still,
know this specific name.
You're right. Wolong is a similar, I would say, similar looking game. Neither's really pushing
nothing. They're both
visuals to any sort of like new level. They look fine. I think they're handsome games. But Wolong does not exhibit these problems, whereas Wild Hearts has them everywhere.
Yeah, it's like I said, incessant in Wild Hearts, and the fact that it is not down to the pure engine issue or something like that. That they just have a really bad DX12 port on PC or something, really bad DX12 code. No, it's not just that. It's like it's very specifically this version of the engine running in this game, and most importantly. And this is where the call out comes, where I said I'm punching up at this video. This is a game published by Electronic Arts. And if you look at this list of things that we just talked about, Dead Space, Jedi Survivor, Wild Hearts, EA's track record this year on PC is so bad, where really, even after all this time, games are not finished. They're releasing in an unfinished states, and the expectation is you buy this, and you just kind of have to live with it if you miss out on the refund period, depending upon the platform you bought it.
We're actually watching another EA game right now, which is the WRC game. That doesn't make the list because it's still less than 3 months old. But we'll see what happens next year, because at this point the game still has major issues.
The game is shipped with
we'll see
issues. Similar to what I'm talking about here. But that one is making me worried too, because it is another EA published game. But the whole point of this right here is that for some reason EA's quality control isn't the people doing quality control, but the decision making to say this is publishable and then publishing it is the big issue, because none of these games on this list launched in what I would consider acceptable state, a finished state, and then they weren't fixed after the fact.
And you know what, Alex? Here's the big bummer about this. People love to, rag on companies like EA, but all of these games are actually good games. They made great games here. That's the thing. That's what makes this so disappointing. This is actually the kind of stuff I want from EA. And I think the quality level is there. It's just that the actual final release, like all of them had somewhat issues on consoles at release, but they've been mostly somewhat shored up. But the PC experience is just bad. And I don't think that's acceptable, and it needs to change.
So for sure does.
They're really letting down both. They're letting down the developers and the players alike, I would say, with this.
Yeah, because it reflects. It doesn't just reflect on the publisher. Obviously, developers get caught up in people like calling them out on like social media, having really bad forum interactions on the Steam forums and things like that. When it's not the developers' decision, these are all publishing decisions, and it's some of them are inexplicably bad. Wild Hearts is a completely unfinished game. Like, this should never have been published. Anyone playing this, even a complete random person who's never played a game in their life, would recognize this as like video buffering errors you'd see like trying to watch a movie on Netflix. Yeah. It just does not look like a fluid experience ever. And yeah, like John said, these are games that in and of themselves seem like they're actually of extremely high quality. People constantly keep talking about how like Wild Hearts is like this really great Monster Hunter-esque kind of game, and it's really good. And they're talking about the console version. The PC version is garbage.
And I played through Dead Space twice, and I loved it. I think it's a fantastic remake, like really, really well done. And Jedi Survivor, again, I've played maybe a third of it, and I do like the game. But man, I just couldn't bring myself to keep going because I ended up playing on PlayStation 5 and it's fine enough there, but the image quality with FSR2 is so bad. And I ended up having to play in the 30 FPS mode, and it's just, I don't know. It really turned me off, and I kind of set it down saying I'll wait for the PC version to be fixed. And well, here we are.
Here we are talking about it at the end of the year. Never ended up happening. So that's the downer note. But the positive note is that we did cover 3 games at the beginning of this list that actually have now improved greatly, and we're really grateful that they did improve. Obviously, they shouldn't have launched in the state they did, but it is actually now in a state where you should definitely try and check them out. And actually, after Forspoken got fixed up, I said in my video, I'm like, actually, now you can maybe try and enjoy the game for what it is, which you really couldn't do at launch.
Yep.
And that's a great thing, to actually try and play the game as, without the technical considerations. Like, the one big issue and a defining feature of every single game on this list, more or less, other than Forspoken to a certain degree, is just stuttering. Stuttering gets completely in the way of the user experience, and it's a huge thing. It's a big issue on PC. Just try and not have releases with stuttering in them. Like,
and look, I want to, while we're talking about that, I want to highlight some recent stuff that was good. I played through RoboCop on the PC, Armored Core 6, games like that. These things ran great. Alan Wake 2,
right?
Sonic Superstars, even. Unity game there, no less.
Right.
These games all ran very well out of the gate on day one. I know some people may have had some issues on one or the other, but they don't have these same large scale issues that causes problems across every PC, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually feel like the second half of this year has largely improved. And even you did the video on the Unreal Engine 5 games, and I think those are actually it's early days, but I think they're largely shaping up better than anything with Unreal Engine 4 as of late.
They are, as a result. And that's one thing I mentioned in the video. So things have gotten better towards the latter half of this year. And I think it's because, to kind of just say it, like, there's been a lot of call out publicly about stuttering issues in PC games and just general quality. Not just
us either. Like,
I'm not talking about us. This is industry wide. It's all over social media. And I think as a result, there's been lessons brought into games that are coming out later on that had longer production cycles than just the earlier part of this year. So I imagine this is going to just, as a trend, get better going forward. But publishers like EA really have to do their part too to ensure that. And that's something that I didn't feel was done in EA this year.
And that's why this video exists.
That's why this video exists at the end of the day.
We want to see this stuff get better.
But John, I think we've talked enough. We've ranted enough for a while. 2022, really bad year for PC ports. The first part of 2023, also really bad.
Really bad.
But it's getting better, thankfully, right now. And thanks for talking to me about bad PC ports, John.
Let's go 2024.
Let's do it, 2024. Can you mess up Alex even more than 2023
Will we be back next year with a sequel to this video?
Please say no.
Maybe
Please
not.
say no.
Not. But we'll find out.
I want to have a joyful Christmas time. But John, yes. If you did like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're already a subscriber, hit that little bell in the corner to be informed as soon as Digital Foundry posts a video. If you want to support our content and any other ranty-like content like this in the future, support us on Patreon.
Ranty.
We got a lot of content there and only more in the future.
Including Alex's reaction.
Including my reaction to playing Wild Hearts, which may at some point be made public. I'm not sure how it is.
I don't know.
Like I said, totally genuine reaction.
Spicy.
It is a little bit spicy, but to say the least, I get a little spicy when I see some really bad stuff. But yes, if you did enjoy this video, thank you everyone. And of course, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year to everyone watching this when they are.
MSI's MPG Infinite X2 PC features powerful Intel Core processors, the latest RTX 40 series graphics, and supports DDR5 memory up to 128GB, with advanced CPU cooling via MSI's own 240mm all-in-one cooler and system thermals handled by the Silent Storm Cooling 2 solution. Every major component in the system is upgradable with a toolless design for easy access. A tempered side panel and MSI Mystic Light RGB adds to the aesthetic, and the latest Wi-Fi 6E networking is supported. Check the link in the video description for full details on the MSI MPG Infinite X2, the all-new MSI gaming desktop.